This is an interesting one. We're talking about property, and renters are being asked and faced with extreme vetting procedures by landlords, with some demanding that tenants provide a CV or links to profiles on social media.
Well, with rental market conditions at their worst to date, are these demands fair? We're joined by the Director of Partnerships at Total Landlord Insurance, Paul Shamplina, and also star of the former programme Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Look, it's tough out there for renters. They don't need to be handing in CVs and photographs to try and win over a room in a house.
You know what? It's the toughest it's ever been in the private rental sector. You know, demand is up 50%. Stock has dwindled 35%. You've got landlords leaving the sector. The average rent in London is £2,400 a month. It is really, really tough. And
that again,
the average rent in London, Eamon, is £2,400 a month.
Average?
Average rent.
So on rental alone, let me sort of do the math. So that's 24,000 and that's a lot. That's about 30 grand.
About 30
of
grand
money
a year. And wage growth is not matching. It's the hardest it's ever been for tenants. Let's be really, really clear for that in that. And the sense that, I spoke to one letting agent. This is not common practice, by the way, be very clear about this. But there's some agents out there that have been asking for tenants to put their best foot forward, which is a bit like a CV or their LinkedIn profile. And actually, the game of renting has changed, especially when you are now trying to play for properties. But there's a shortage.
What's your LinkedIn profile got to do with renting capacity?
Well, I'll tell you what it is. The landlords make an informed decision that can tenants pay the rent? And is there affordability? And actually, affordability now has gone up to the worst it's ever been, which is 39% of someone's wages goes towards rent. It's never been like that.
There's ways of checking whether someone can afford things. You ask for bank statements or whatever it might be, but you don't... Is it not just a chance to be snobby? Have a look and go, I'm going to choose somebody who I think's got the best job or is the best looking, or, you know, they've got...
But I suppose what Paul's saying is if you're landed with a tenant who's not paying their bills, what's the worst that can happen?
Well, the worst can happen, I know, because I run a business called Landlord Action, and we help landlords with problem tenants, and it can take the best part of 6 to 12 months to get a tenant out your property if they're not paying the rent. Let's be very clear, there's some most tenants out there are great tenants and are paying the rent on time and under more stress than ever before, especially with electricity and gas bills going up 66% and food bills going up 20%. But coming back to your point, there is referencing, there is affordability, OK, to make sure that the tenants can pay their rent. A landlord now is in a good position in the sense that they've got so many tenants vying for their property, they want to make the best informed decision. So if a tenant is putting their best foot forward, as said in The Guardian, they want to make sure that is that tenant working at the workplace they say they're going to be working at. And can there be discrimination? I think there most probably could be discrimination upon that as well. But let's be very clear, it's not a common practice. And I think most probably it's more so a London-centric thing rather than the rest of the country.
Where the competition is really hot. Because we've seen it in the private owning market, that people would be going to sealed bids and submitting letters with photographs of their children and trying to sell themselves to prospective sellers because they want to distinguish themselves from other buyers. And now I suppose...
But I think that the psyche of tenants has to change as well, you know. The problem is 92% of searches for a property are done online. A tenant is driven by the property, not by their landlord or by their letting agent. And the affordability issue is quite something... I think when it comes to... I heard one story of a work colleague that was advising a tenant. She was vying for a property, I think it was near Richmond, and there was over 110 tenants vying for this one property. She gave her some advice because she's in the industry. She put her best foot forward, explained why she's a good tenant. Obviously, you have to get a previous landlord's reference as well, which is really important to make sure that if you've been renting, have you been keeping the property in a good state? Yeah. Are you giving me access? Have you not been trashing the property? And she actually got the property. She actually got the property out of 120 people.
Wow, OK.
See, I wouldn't be a good landlord because I'd be too personal about it. I would be treating it as if it is my home, my possession that someone's living in.
Well, that's a really good point, Eamon. 85% of landlords out there have between 1 and 3 properties, and a lot of them have owned a property and moved elsewhere. And, you know, whether you treat this as a business, at the end of the day, let's remember one thing. Your tenant is your customer. They're paying most of their money towards the rent and your income. And actually, you know, most landlords out there do manage properties really well. They get themselves in a problem trying to manage, and there's over 175 rules and regulation in renting out a property. That's why they should use an accredited letting agent.
So the long and the short of it is, and you give the figures for London, it's very, very tough out there and very, very expensive out there. And I don't know if Leeds is any different, if Aberdeen's any different after that.
Everything's gone up.
Yeah.
Everything's gone up. It's tough out there, as Isabel says. What is your view off the market and how much tougher is it going to get? I mean, I constantly have this disbelief that central government and local authorities will not invest in social housing. I just think it's terrible. So you rely on private landlords and then people criticise private landlords.
You've answered your own question. We have a severe lack of social housing. We've had years and decades of... I think, was it 2 years ago we built 6,000 social houses in a population of 70 million. And now there's been more pressure on the private rental sector at 20%. So that is the answer. The biggest losers in all this will most probably be vulnerable tenants, because don't forget, they're also abolishing a notice called a Section 21, a non-fault notice, which means that landlords are going to be much more stringent when it comes to referencing. And those tenants that are on benefits, and don't forget the LHA rates, the local housing allowance rates, aren't going up until 2024, they're going to be big losers, because if you've got private tenants vying for a property with a housing benefit tenant, and a private tenant can pay £400-500 a month more, and then, of course, we have a temporary housing accommodation crisis. It's a nightmare.
Nightmare, OK.
So many factors
Thank you, Paul. Appreciated that. Paul Shamplina is Director of Partnerships at Total Landlord Insurance.